Paris to London to Hollywood, the Da Vinci Code is everywhere. And it seems like everyone has read it. But why? What's the big deal? Why are we so fascinated by the perfect airplane read?
I thought it was a great beach book. You know, it's really a good thriller. It was pure nonsense, but it was fun.
Pure nonsense or truth finally revealed? What if Jesus and Mary Magdalene actually were married with children? Could their descendants still walk the earth today?
Jesus and Mary Magdalene were not only an item, but also she was actually his successor.
It's defamatory, it's scandalous, libelous, and blasphemous.
Has a secret society called the Priory of Sion existed since the time of the Knights Templar? And do they hold the secret to the bloodline of Jesus Christ? Is it possible, as the book says, that the Holy Grail was not a cup, but a person? And how did Leonardo da Vinci get mixed up in all of this? We'll examine the hard evidence with believers and skeptics alike to sort out the fact from the fiction. It has sold over 30 million copies, has been translated into over 40 languages, and has become a permanent fixture on the New York Times bestseller list. And new books about the Da Vinci Code's controversial themes are quickly stacking up. It's a conspiracy, a love story, and a quest, elements that many readers love. The novel opens in Paris at the Louvre, where the museum's curator is found dead with the only clues to his murder leading to Leonardo da Vinci's artwork. The dead man's granddaughter and a Harvard expert in symbols set off on a chase through the streets of Paris, intent on solving the murder, only to wind up in a modern-day Grail hunt across Europe. Author Dan Brown's fictional characters are original creations, but the controversial assertions the book makes are not. In fact, most can be found in the 1982 bestseller Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Michael Bagent, Richard Lee, and Henry Lincoln. It was originally penned as an historical non-fiction book, although some critics consider it a pseudo-history. Lee claims that he and his cohorts came across what we now know as the central plot line of the Da Vinci Code back in the mid-1970s, the story of a secret society called the Priory of Sion that was created to protect the bloodline of Jesus Christ.
We had no preconceptions. We had no idea where it was leading. We simply followed the evidence.
It all started when they stumbled across a local mystery in this picturesque little village in the south of France, a town called Rennes-le-Château. According to the legend, in 1885, a handsome young priest named Béranger Saunière is sent by the Catholic Church to take over the parish of Rennes-le-Château. Within 2 years, Saunière sets about restoring the crumbling church, which was dedicated to Mary Magdalene in 1059. During the construction, he finds a hollow pillar just under the altar, which contains a number of parchments. Author Tracy Twyman's investigation for her own book corroborates the Saunière story as it is relayed in Holy Blood, Holy Grail.
After he discovered this parchment, he became very wealthy. He was spending a lot of money on himself. He also was entertaining wealthy friends. He used some of the money to renovate the town that he lived in, and then he used a lot of the money to redecorate the church in an extremely bizarre way.
Clive Prince, co-author of The Templar Revelation, one of Dan Brown's other primary sources, has also done extensive research on Rennes-le-Château. He believes that there is no way to know what the priest supposedly found.
That's the most obvious explanation. He found something. And then you say, okay, if he found a treasure, whose treasure? Well, the problem with that area of France, with its history, is there are so many possible treasures it could be. You know, it could be the treasure of the Knights Templars, it could be the treasures of the Cathars. The area seemed to have been a magnet for people losing treasures throughout history.
Holy Blood, Holy Grail claims that whatever the treasure was, this priest in a hamlet of 200 parishioners suddenly had more money than Midas, and he began throwing it around in the strangest ways. He built a tower to Mary Magdalene on the side of a mountain, and the church renovations took a swift turn to the garish. An inscription above the front door read, "Terribilis est locus iste," insinuating that the church held something dreadful. Just inside, he mounted the demon Asmodeus, the guardian of hidden treasures, and the Stations of the Cross, which were each inconsistent with the accepted biblical versions, the most outstanding of which seems to intimate that Jesus was being carried out of his tomb after the crucifixion, not into it. Was the young priest showing off his interior decorator, or was he trying to subtly reveal a damaging secret, one that could forever change Christianity as we know it?
There is another possibility, that documents led not to a treasure because there's no indication of Sonier looking for a treasure. It is possible that they contained a secret, and the secret was worth money. A secret perhaps that could have been used to blackmail somebody, the Vatican maybe.
We may never know for sure what Béranger Saunière supposedly learned from those parchments, as in 1917 he died penniless without ever revealing the secret. Still, the authors of Holy Blood, Holy Grail speculate that while Saunière may have found a treasure, what made him rich and powerful was this secret.
Our hypothesis is that Jesus had a rightful claim to the throne. He was married, there were offspring. The offspring escaped with the Magdalene to the south of France. 4 centuries later, that offspring, or that bloodline, intermarried with the royal line of the Franks to produce the Merovingians.
Considered the first French royals, the Merovingians were a Frankish dynasty who ruled parts of modern-day France and Germany from the 5th to the 8th century AD. Bagent, Lee, and Lincoln first came across them in the papers known as the Dossier Secret, or secret documents, discovered at Paris's Bibliothèque Nationale in 1975, which included endless pages of the Merovingian family tree.
And one particular page that stood out. At the top, there was a logo. Below that, there was Prélé de Sion, and a list of alleged grandmasters. If you assembled the data on that page, what emerged was something ostensibly attesting to the existence of a secret society.
A secret society called the Priory of Sion, with members such as Isaac Newton and Leonardo da Vinci, which had allegedly protected the bloodline of Jesus for hundreds of years. So who led them to the Dossier Secret in the first place? A Frenchman named Pierre Plantard, who claimed that he himself was a descendant of the Merovingians and may even have been a Grand Master of the Priory of Sion himself.
We asked him if he was Grand Master, and he said no. Not then, anyway. Later, in the late 80s, there were reports that he was now Grand Master.
By now, for anyone who has read the Da Vinci Code, it's clear how much the book owes to the details contained in Holy Blood, Holy Grail. And Dan Brown cleverly tips his hat to them with thinly veiled references. In the novel, the curator of the Louvre, who is found murdered with a strange code scrawled next to his body, is named Jacques Saunière, the surname of the priest of Rennes-le-Château. And this Saunière is supposedly the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. His granddaughter, Sophie Neveu-Plantard, shares a last name with the discoverer of the Dossier Secret, and she's a supposed Merovingian descendant. Outside Paris, at Chateau Villette, she and Harvard codebreaker Robert Langdon seek help from Grail expert Lee Teabing, an anagram of Holy Blood, Holy Grail's authors, Lee and Bagent's names. And most famously, the headline-grabbing revelation of the Da Vinci Code mirrors the hypothesis of Holy Blood, Holy Grail. So what's the problem?
Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code presents it as fact. We do not present it as fact. We suggest it as a possibility.
Though officially fiction, the mega-successful novel has caused a firestorm of controversy around the world, mainly due to its fact page, which claims that the Priory of Sion and its list of famous members are real, and that all descriptions of artwork, architecture, documents, and secret rituals are accurate. The issue for some is that fact and fiction are so closely interwoven that they no longer know what is real and what is not. And as a result, people now take tours all over Europe to follow the trail of the Da Vinci Code to find out the truth for themselves. They search around Westminster Abbey looking for clues to the mysteries in the book. They seek out the Temple Church hidden away in the back streets of London to find the missing effigy of the Knights Templar, following Dan Brown's cryptic message, "In London lies a knight, a pope interred." And they often make their way to Paris to the Church of the Saint-Sulpice to find the intertwined P and S in the stained glass windows, allegedly signifying the Priory of Sion, and the so-called Rose Line, which the book says will lead them to the Holy Grail. With all of these real landmarks and identifiable clues, is it possible that the central themes of the Da Vinci Code are actually true? What if Mary Magdalene were married to Jesus, and they did create a bloodline? Was a secret society called the Priory of Sion created in 1099 to keep this secret? And did Leonardo da Vinci, the supposed Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, actually encode the Jesus-Mary Magdalene story in his artwork? Could she herself have been the Holy Grail? Being labeled a prostitute for 2,000 years isn't great for anyone's reputation, particularly Mary Magdalene's, especially when it's never written in the Bible or anywhere else. So who started this smear campaign? And what was she really like? Lynn Picknett is the co-author of The Templar Revelation, where Dan Brown may have gleaned much of his information about Mary Magdalene and the lost sacred feminine.
It's quite clear that Mary Magdalene was not just the first century equivalent of the little lady who makes the coffee, that sort of humbles around in the background after the men. That, of course, is the image, if not worse, that the church wanted us to believe. She was, by all accounts, a very feisty lady, an independent woman of means, and she and the other women, actually, the New Testament says this, kept the men financially as they went around on their mission.
In the New Testament, Mary, called Magdalene, was exorcised of demons by Jesus, and from then on followed him as a disciple. But very early on in the Catholic Church, she got mixed up with two other women in the Gospels in what is known as the muddle of the Marys, and theologians believe that this is how the whole prostitute rumor got started. Pope Gregory I cemented Mary Magdalene's bad reputation in 591 AD by delivering a homily which united Mary with the unnamed women. If you look at the Bible, you can surmise the source of confusion. The passage from the Gospel of Luke about the unnamed sinner woman does come just before Mary Magdalene is first introduced. But is this just a case of mistaken identity, unlucky placement in the good book, or something more subversive?
The church really wanted to darken her name because they knew what she was really like, and they were utterly determined that no other woman would rise up through the ranks of the church and become as important, as charismatic as she had been in the Jesus movement.
The reason that the church has had to distort the real Mary Magdalene, the real historical figure, and kind of invent a new version of her is for many reasons. It has to do with the church's attitude to women generally as the church developed into a hierarchical organisation.
According to Prince, the early Christians lacked a leading lady, and eventually people demanded that a goddess figure be added to the Christ story. But the church chose the Virgin Mary over Mary Magdalene.
It is as simple as virgins good, prostitutes bad, the two opposites of sexuality. Virginity is holy, it's the right way to be. prostitution, promiscuity is evil. It's a thing that has to be forgiven. The ideal model for women became a virgin. Figure that one.
And the Catholic Church didn't officially correct itself about Mary Magdalene being mistaken for a prostitute until 1969. But what about being married to Jesus?
It appears that she and Jesus were desperately in love, and I would go so far as to say, judging from the Gnostic Gospels, that in fact Mary was very much the power behind the throne.
When the apostles all fled at the crucifixion, Mary stayed behind, risking her own safety to mourn the death of Jesus, her husband. The suggestion that Jesus was married is another reason that Dan Brown's novel has caused an uproar in the religious community. Father William Stetson finds it inaccurate at best.
It's libelous. There's absolutely no foundation in fact. It may be, it is a speculation which may find acceptance in a rather skeptical world, but it is contrary to the whole tradition of the Christian Church.
But some people don't really see the problem with a married Jesus.
Jesus' importance, historically, resides in his message. How is his message in any way compromised or diluted by the possibility of his having been married? Or alternatively, how is it in any way validated by his having been chaste? There's no connection between the two things.
Is there any actual proof that he was married? The Da Vinci Code claims that proof of their relationship lies in the lesser-known Gnostic Gospels found in Egypt in 1945. These Gospels, which were rejected by the Church, present a vastly different Jesus from the New Testament, a more human, less divine Jesus, one who might have been married.
In one of the Gnostic Gospels, there is quite a lovely little moment where the male disciples go to Jesus and complain and say, just showing how dim they were actually, saying, Lord, why do you love this woman more than you love us? Why are you always kissing her on the mouth? And you think, come on boys, think about it.
If you look at the actual page, and if you could read ancient Coptic, you would be able to see that it says that he kissed her on the blank, as the parchment is torn just at that word.
If it was that he was simply kissed her on the cheek, why would it upset the men so much? Whatever it was, it really upset them. So it's the mouth, or heaven forfend, the foot or the hand, because in those days that would be subservience to a woman.
However, there's a problem with the Gnostic Gospels. Most scholars believe they are later works. The Church considers them apocryphal. So what about the Da Vinci Code's next assertion that not only were they married, but that Mary Magdalene was pregnant with Jesus' child at the crucifixion?
If he was married, there almost certainly was progeny. According to a number of traditions and some plausible sources, the woman escaped to the south of France. If she did indeed do so, it is reasonable to assume that she brought progeny with her, or that she was pregnant at the time, one or the other.
Among the local legends about Mary Magdalene is that when she came to France, she came bearing the Holy Grail. And this is where the claims of the Priory of Sion come into play. They say that the Holy Grail was a symbol of Magdalene's impregnated womb, carrying the seed of Christ.
The Da Vinci Code then suggests that she gave birth to a daughter, Sarah, who eventually intermarried with the first French royal family, the Merovingians, continuing the bloodline of her famous mother and father.
If you're talking about a bloodline stretching over 2 millennia, you're not talking about a family tree, you're talking about a bloody forest.
There's probably millions of people, therefore, who are related dimly to Jesus and Mary Magdalene. It could be me. It could be any of you.
In the Da Vinci Code, alleged evidence of Jesus and Mary Magdalene's union continues to mount when we take a much closer look at the famous painting from the wall of the Church of Santa Maria della Grazia in Milan, Italy, Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. But first, a look at the complex man behind this painting. Sigmund Freud once said, Leonardo was like a man who awoke too early in the darkness, while the others were still all asleep. Martin Kemp is one of the foremost experts on Leonardo da Vinci in the world.
People say Leonardo's a man ahead of his time. I think he just made much more of his time than anyone else was able to do so. My favourite thing in Leonardo is that he drew the world on paper with a conviction, vitality and penetration which no one has achieved before or since.
Leonardo was born in Anciano, Italy, 3 miles from the town of Vinci, on April 15, 1452. Da Vinci, not a surname, but rather meaning from Vinci. Even the title of the Da Vinci Code irks many in the art world, as no one properly refers to the artist as anything but Leonardo. The illegitimate son of a Florentine notary and a local peasant woman, he was raised by his father in Florence.
Presumably Leonardo as a child has shown talent for drawing or doing works of art, and at some point, probably via his father, who was an important notary in Florence, he was introduced to Andrea del Verrocchio, who was the leading sculptor, one of the leading painters, and somebody who was employed heavily by the Medici family, who then ruled Florence. So he had an entree into probably the best studio in Florence.
Legend has it that after Leonardo assisted Verrocchio by painting the angel in his famous Baptism of Christ, his mentor saw that he could never match his pupil's talent and declared that he would never paint again. Leonardo's artwork was and is remarkable, but his talents did not stop there. He also had a deep love for science and engineering, recording up to 13,000 pages of notes and drawings in his notebooks, in his backwards mirror writing.
The notebooks are extraordinary, we take them for granted, but there's nothing quite like them. What is extraordinary is that a single sheet in Leonardo's work may contain anatomy, physics, notes on nature, scribbles on painting, maybe a little study of a head and so on.
And he was a man of contradictions, a peacenik who designed the first machine gun, a vegetarian who dissected animals and humans in order to learn more about anatomy. But was he a practical joker, as Dan Brown writes in the Da Vinci Code?
He was an illusionist and a conjurer and a very funny man. Obviously, he also had a dark side.
Was he a member of the Priory of Sion, a clandestine society entrusted with a massive secret? And is it possible that he encoded his artwork to subtly reveal the secret to the rest of the world?
It's quite possible that Leonardo da Vinci was trying to communicate one of the secrets that he had learned as a Grand Master of the Priory of Sion, which is that Jesus and Mary were married, but he couldn't communicate that openly, and so he had to encode it in the painting.